The death doula is facilitating really important little rituals and sharing circles with the dying person and the families around giving thanks, being grateful for all that was, so that we can let go with dignity and celebration and joy. And also just kind of being deeply present with this painful moment that it is to say goodbye to a loved one and for the loved one to leave this world. And I just thought that there's something here. There's a quality of the presence, there's a quality of the questions being asked in these situations that I think we need much more of. And an organizational death doula was just a word that I made up. I don't think it's a thing, at least not yet. But mark my words, it will be, because we need it deeply. We need those space holders that can facilitate that we are saying goodbye to the world that we know. We're saying goodbye to our old identities. We are saying goodbye to the way we used to do business. And we are entering a new phase. And that requires this deep quality of presence.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth. Greetings, Earthling. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This is Dan, your host and guide. The Spaceship Earth is a podcast exploring the intersections of ecology, culture and transformation. It's where we're asking, how can we live with greater imagination and responsibility as crew members on board a living planet in crisis? We see two main stories on Spaceship Earth. There's the passenger story, the dominant story of capitalist modernity. It's a passive story of more, about control, accumulation, individuals, nation states and separate human selves. It's based on extraction, transaction and distraction. It's dividing us and destroying life and leading to collapse. This is the separation story. And then there's the crew story, an active story of community and relationships, human and more than human. It's based on connection, cooperation and participation, leading towards regeneration. This is the story of relationality and interconnection. The metaphor of Earth as a spaceship comes from Buckminster Fuller, who observed that we're all aboard this miraculous vessel called Earth, hurtling through space, utterly dependent on its life support systems. The danger is acting like passengers, entitled, disengaged, destructive freeloaders at worst. The invitation of becoming crew is a call to awaken into shared stewardship of the spaceship. It's an existential shift, from entitlement to participation, from separation to interdependence, from spectating collapse to navigating complexity together. It's about repatterning how we relate to the Earth, with nature, as we call it, how we relate to ourselves and to each other, and to the invisible scaffolding of modernity that still whispers in our frazzled minds: control, escape, purity, progress. So here, on this podcast and in our events and learning experiences, we vulnerably explore, how might we live regeneratively? How do we attune to the places we are in, the bodies we inhabit, to our more than human kin and the greater planetary cycles? How do we metabolize the grief of violence and collapse without collapsing into despair? how to co-create life-sustaining cultures grounded in humility, not certainty. So, welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. This is episode 117. And this is me getting back into recording conversations again after a few months off, which I've really needed. My guest in this episode is the magic Laura Storm. Laura is a true visionary and, in my opinion, a pioneering human in the field of regeneration. Laura was first on the podcast in 2019 in episode 13, where we had a good conversation on the emerging field of regenerative leadership. She returned in 2020 in episode 32 with Giles Hutchins, another pioneer in the regenerative leadership field and co-author of the book they released together 7 years ago, Regenerative Leadership. Laura has gone on to become a highly in-demand keynote speaker, advisor and teacher, and launched the regenerative leadership learning platforms Regenerators, dedicated to reimagine leadership, systems and ways of living to align with the wisdom of living systems. Regenerators is a global ecosystem and community devoted to growing regenerative leadership for a world in transition. Over many years, they have supported leaders, organisations and change makers to move beyond extractive ways of operating and into life-affirming, resilient and relational ways of being and leading. So I reached out to Laura recently, not to talk about the possibilities of regenerative leadership, but really to have a chat about this moment, the moment of stuckness, as I tend to describe it. And I was really interested in exploring some of what Laura has been tending to following her intentional withdrawal from the limelight, let's say, in 2024 for a year to investigate the topics of death and endings with death doulas and how that's showing up in the world of business and organisational leadership and what was pulling her towards that, and then how is that manifesting in this moment. I really appreciate these kinds of moves from leaders like Laura, this integrity, honesty and humility and being true to oneself right now. And I'd love to see more of that and speak to more folks working from that place. So this conversation perhaps asks, what if regeneration begins not with new ideas, but with learning how to let go? It's an open, vulnerable chat on why our current moment calls for more than new strategies or better leadership models. What does it mean to become life-affirming in a world shaped by extraction, and why every genuine transformation seems to require paying real attention to some form of grief, surrender and ending. The conversation moves from corporate boardrooms to forests and rivers, between inner and outer regeneration, exploring how resilience might be found not through hardening ourselves, but through deeper relationships, connection, belonging, listening, and our capacity to stay present with uncertainty and loss. This is a conversation about endings, but even more, it's a conversation about the kind of presence that allows something genuinely new to emerge. Right, let's cut to it. This is the Spaceship Earth podcast in conversation with Laura Storm. Enjoy. Laura, welcome back to the Spaceship Earth podcast. It's good to see you.
It's a delight to be back, Dan. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's been a while. Do you know what I was going to do? Because I've just started doing this new record. I was going to ring a bell. You okay if I ring a bell just to bring us in?
Ring a bell.
Beautiful. It's lovely to see you. And yeah, so I've had a few months off. So you're my first guest for a few months. I've been regenerating of sorts, I think.
It's a delight to be your first guest.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it's been since lockdown that you and I connected last.
Yeah, it was 2020, and it was with you and Giles Hutchins, and it was literally, I think we were sort of like we were like 3 weeks. I think you'd been in it for longer.
Maybe.
Because you got locked up before us Brits got locked up, and I do remember actually, because I remember sort of listening back to that and thinking like, oh my god, I was quite on edge.
Yeah, I do remember the energy that we were in. It was all a little bit frantic, and I remember we were stuck. My family was stuck in our tiny apartment in Copenhagen. I had a baby who was 6 months at the time, and they were next door, and my daughter, who was 6, was in the other room trying to get kind of her teacher to facilitate a classroom for 6-year-old on Zoom. It was just chaotic.
Yeah, it was, it's mad, isn't it, when you look back on that time? And I don't know, I think when I looked at the future at that point, I didn't think we'd be here 6 years later, in terms of like, I really felt like stuff was going to really radically change.
Yeah, me too. We actually, a couple of weeks after our conversation, decided to move to Portugal to steward a permaculture farm just for a year, but just to kind of seize the moment and take the opportunity that came our way and do something different. And I had the exact same feeling. There was actually a part of me that
really, that's a blessing. Not just us moving to Portugal, but this whole thing. I think for many of us kind of systems thinkers, we were like, yes, now is the time. It will, the fragility in our ecosystems, supply chains, etc., and also our inner resilience. It will be so obvious now that we need new ways. And for a few years, I actually think many really wonderful things happened. I don't know if that was the case for you, but I had a couple of years where the interest and the demand for my work just kind of grew beautifully. And then things have started to shift, to be really honest. Yeah.
Well, I hear that, and I can relate to that, and maybe we'll dig into some of that as we go.
Let's do that.
Just because I like to sort of help listeners position people and stuff, like, would you, like, whereabouts are you right now on Spaceship Earth, and how are you showing up in this moment?
Physically, I am very close to the second largest forest in Denmark. Coming back from Portugal, we decided to move closer to the forest, so I am between the second and the third largest forest in Denmark, 5 minutes from each, and that's really wonderful. So that's an hour and a half north of Copenhagen. You are finding me in just a couple of days away from going on a 4-week-long summer break. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about down with my family. You're also finding me in the midst of a very heat wave, not only in Denmark, but many places in the world. So you're finding me a bit raw and sensitive. I have noticed that there's a lot of kind of underlying grief that this heat wave is activating within me that I think will probably be felt in our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I actually recorded a podcast last week for someone else's. I was on someone else's podcast, and it was 36, I think, or 30 something. And we ended up actually, myself and the host had to take our tops off, which is the first. It was an audio recording only, but it was absurd, the heat.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, really that as well. I've been really feeling that. Yeah, just exactly that. The sort of, it's almost hard to articulate, but it's just this very deep felt sense of uncomfortableness and grief and confusion. And it's a sort of bewildering, discombobulating sort of time, I feel. You know, it's interesting. I think that's why I was keen to reach out to you, because you first came on this podcast in 2019. You were episode 13, and you came back with Giles Hutchins on that lockdown moment. I think you I don't know. I think were you writing the book at that point, or had you just?
No, the book came out. Actually, wow, is it 1st of July today? Yeah, wow. It just comes to my mind now that today, 7 years ago, we published the book.
Right. Wow. There you go. Excellent. So it must have been about 9 months after you'd published it. And yeah, I think, I got that sense, I think that you just spoke to post-COVID, when we really felt this kind of like this sort of, this kind of reveal, this big reveal that was going on.
Yes.
And on so many levels and layers. Yeah. And I guess it's still happening in some ways, but so much was kind of exposed in such a short space of time. And it felt like, okay, lots of folks are really seeing things now, seeing perspectives that they hadn't seen before, and that felt like, as painful and as complicated and uncomfortable it was, it felt like it was so necessary. And there was this kind of growing awareness, I think, and more of an understanding of the entanglement of all of these, all of these kind of power structures and systems, and a real ability for people to start to join the dots and to see what was seen as kind of like, successful and appealing and desirable over here was in fact a complete violent nightmare over here. Do you know what I mean? And I think that was happening faster and faster, and more layers were coming down, and I saw that in the kind of, I guess, the field of practitioners, and a sense that things were really starting to move, and which is what you spoke to, and you've obviously had a few years of that. I think you just launched I don't know if you just launched the first course then, the leadership program, 2020.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot has happened, and I guess, and a lot of shifts have changed since then. And we're I don't know how we would describe this moment we're in. That's what I really would like to dig into. And there's a few things that you have spoken to in the last couple of years that I have seen, and that's why I reached out to you, as you know, that just were really interesting things that you're sharing, and questions you're holding, and topics that you have been kind of exploring, which we can speak to. But perhaps, maybe going back to this moment, and I would just say, how would you describe what you're experiencing right now in your part of the spaceship, and with the networks that you're in and the ecosystems you're entangled with?
So because we started our sharing today with the lockdown and all that activated, however painful that period and process was, it activated, from my point of view, also a lot of receptivity and openness and vulnerability in terms of kind of receiving messages about the interconnectedness of life that could be more difficult to get across to a business audience before, but it was like the doorways, the gateways was open, and there was this receptivity and curiosity to explore, what does life-affirming business actually mean, both on the inner and outer dimension. So for a few years there was this kind of vast openness, and something that meant that opportunities and demand that kind of came across from my work, just as I said before, grew in a beautiful way, but also to an extent where I, in 2023, towards the end of 2023, I was giving so many interviews and way too many keynotes, and was just kind of on and public, far too much for my sensitive personality. And I remember in an interview, the interviewer could sense that I was a bit kind of maybe fatigued around being asked the same kind of questions. What is regenerative leadership, and what does regenerative business mean, et cetera, and not that I don't understand these questions and the relevance of these, but I crave something deeper, but also because in my work, what I had seen again and again from working with executives, or just people like you and I, there was a longing for whatever regenerative leadership or business means, this life-affirming way, this new way that we could redesign our presence on this planet. And there was a massive and intense curiosity and longing and excitement in the beginning. But then it was like when they reached this kind of for real threshold, where it dawned on them that for me to actually leap forward, I need to go through a process of death. I need to mourn and grieve who I was, what I have done, my old identity. And that means that for some people, a contraction, a resistance, sometimes even kind of like anger is activated in them. That I, throughout 2023, realized that I really needed to be deeply present with that energy, with that kind of, I don't know what to call it, this metamorphosis that is infused with grief and excitement and fear and hesitations, but also courage, all of these things that coexist at the same time. How do I hold that best for myself, but also in the spaces that I facilitate? And that made me realize that I actually needed to go through an ego death as well, yet ego death. I think maybe in our conversation in 2019, we have probably touched upon another ego death of mine when I had a severe brain injury back in 2015 and wasn't able to do anything for a couple of years. So for people that are curious about that, they could listen back to that. I'm sure we must have addressed that. So let's not go too much into detail with that, but that was an experience that I had that meant that I had an embodied knowing that however painful and traumatic these death processes can be, they also bring about evolution and growth and new life that we can tend to. So I started to notice in myself a pattern of my inner ego that had taken up too much space. So when you are given platforms again and again, when you're given the microphone again and again, and when people are kind of like, just to be radically honest, kind of putting you on a pedestal and celebrating your work, you have to be very mindful not to let your ego get in the way. And I started to notice patterns that it would be healthy for me to retreat from the world and not have a presence on LinkedIn and on keynote stages and podcasts. So I just started to decline everything, said no to everything, and made a kind of public statement about that so people knew not to get a hold of me. So for 2024, that's was all I did, was facilitate my year-long journey on Regenerators Academy. And that was a process of interviewing death doulas. And why did I interview death doulas? I think their work is deeply, deeply meaningful. How are we present with what is dying is a capacity that has been suppressed in our modern culture for such a long time. And instead of celebrating the presence of death and seeing it as the beginning of new life, we have this collective fear around that death doulas do not. So I wanted to explore and tap into their experience. I wanted to explore into different religions' relationship to death. That's what I wanted to do for 2024, because I think there will be a high demand for organizational death doulas going forward, but also just in general, how do we facilitate spaces where we can grieve what is dying? And on an organizational level, how do we facilitate spaces where we can grieve processes, ways of doing things, ways of collaborating, ways of doing business that we can do no more? So that's what I have done after I started to enter the world again. I facilitated quite a few processes for organizations and companies that is focused on, before we start to get excited about regenerative business, biomimicry, life-affirming design, and ways of collaborating, there's something here that we need to hold space for as well, because it's a both and. We are letting in new life by hospicing and tending to what we need to let go of. So that shows on a micro level, or the processes that I hold space for when I take teams out into nature. Because what I see again and again as another pattern, that even people that are kind of working within big multinationals and are not like you and I accustomed to speaking about grief processes. I'm sure that's very present in your work as well. for them, there is this longing of being held in the processes around their mini ego deaths. And it's a very kind of visceral, strong presence that I see across the board, across fields and sectors. This longing of being human. Yes, I may be head of sales on the European market for X company, but I'm also a human being who sends the heat waves and the changes in weather patterns. I'm also a human that have built my entire identity around a corporate career where I had to act a certain way. And now I know intuitively that I need to let go of these rigid, mechanistic, toxic power over colonial patterns. And that is so overwhelming and exciting at the same time. So it is that kind of, how do we hold those processes?
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot there. You were talking about, your own sense of ego death, your sense of this parts of yourself, again, that needed to, and I guess my inquiry into this, into noticing these patterns as well in my own life and around me and with those that I'm working with. Increasingly, I'm sort of trying to, look to the living world, look to the modern human world to understand that these cycles are always happening, right? And there is always a shedding and a letting go and a decaying, and how the trust that's required to be with that sort of ancient intelligence, rhythm, pattern. That obviously everything that is non-human is in that, is trusting that pattern, whatever it is. But of course, for us in our sort of, our sort of over-rationalized, heady minds, we're, for many, many reasons, right? There is, as you spoke to, there is a kind of a phobia towards, I think, even maybe seeing ourselves. I think it's even understanding ourselves potentially to be, just to be that because there's one thing going there, but the second thing, even just to accept ourselves as these shifting, shedding, growing, dying things, that we have these cycles and patterns in us, and yet we're suppressing so much of it. So you're feeling that yourself, which I can totally relate to through my own experiences. But it's interesting because obviously you have spent a lot of time working within the leadership space, within corporates and organizations. So I'm really fascinated with, that when you sense this going on, and like I say, there's so much in it, because as you said, if someone's identity has been built through decades of service towards a business, a skill set, a way of being, a way of showing up, it's incredibly challenging, right? To let go of that, to even accept that is over, because there's all of the entanglements that are connected to that outside of just your own identity. It's your identity, it's how you show up with your friends and your family and your community. I mean, it's a lot, right? We've built these kind of professional
the house
identities.
You live in, the car you drive,
everything, right? All of it is locked in. And so you can sort of sometimes, what my experience was when I was doing more work within these spaces was that there was a sudden kind of, it's almost like you'd get to this sense of, oh, fuck, yeah, we are talking here about like a dying of these ways, right? Yeah. But also then you'd quite quickly get to a kind of, well, we can't go there because that's just that's too much, because the implications feel so much. And I guess obviously you have organizations and some types of organization who are able to be thinking in this way, but I'm imagining still for most organizations, this is such a tricky threshold to deal with. And I mean, even just as outside of our professional lives, it's I'm seeing this at the moment, right? With the heat, we see this with everything. It's almost like people sort of intuitively know that things are very, very odd and very strange. And yet it's hard to stay with that. The pull is to sort of just not go there, or to keep the distraction, or to, So anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this. What were you what were you hearing or sensing or feeling within organizations, I guess, that really made you feel that actually I need to go and look at death with much more attention? What were you sort of noticing? Why did that inquiry happen in 24 beyond just your own sense of ego death?
It was a fatigue around, I felt that I was doing people a disservice by almost being a missionary preaching all over the world the life-affirming message, using people with hope, and there is a new way, and there is a new way, and there is a life, or it's not new, it's really, really old, but it's something we have forgotten that we could reconnect ourselves to, and we could create fascinating businesses and designs of societies that is based on life-affirming principles, the principles of life. And people got excited about that. There was a good few years where people were really, really excited about that because there was a longing for a message that was not a message of destruction and despair, but one of life. But I started to feel an increasing sense that it was too hollow, because once you start to do this work on a deep level and start to actually transform your ways, regardless of whether you're working as an independent consultant or a startup or a big multinational or a municipality, you can't really redesign towards life-affirming principles unless you have also been through this death process. So right. that became increasingly clear for me. That's just part of the rite of passage. And we need that both and. So it was this it was because I was increasingly finding myself in forest with an executive team or just a department or the HR department of a municipality. And that grief emerged that, yes, we want all of this, but I feel locked in. I feel locked in here in terms of my personality, identity, the role that I've played for 20, 30, sometimes 40, 50 years, depending on the age of the people that I've worked with. And on an organizational level, we are so stuck within the rigid mechanistic ways of collaborating and doing business that it's just so overwhelming to see how we could weave in life-affirming ways. And you can't do that unless you also honor and almost, it may sound weird to the listener, but almost in a sacred ceremonial way, hold space for all that used to be. All that used to be on an individual level, on a team level, on an organizational level, collective level. Honor what was, but also letting go. And speaking the letting go process out for real. So it's not just something that's happening on an individual level, but we are bringing it into our teams and our departments. What do we want to let be in the past? Ways that we have collaborated in the past. And that was a different way of facilitating. It was a different way of communicating than just spreading regenerative leadership, regenerative business.
Yeah.
It was that deeper work of letting go to let come. And often it required a flexibility in me as a facilitator as well. Sometimes it required to actually literally hold space for the primal scream of death and tears. And it for some, it can be very emotional to go in that field, in that space where they are saying goodbye to an identity that they know if they are contributing to honor and nourish that identity, they will continue down a track of extraction, depletion, power over, and that are ripples that they don't want to help activate no more. Because I believe in the good of humanity. I believe that most people, they want to do good. They want to contribute to something deeply meaningful, regardless of what their line of work is. And that's another pattern that I've seen again and again. People want to do good. They want to contribute. But it's in high demand. Also, when companies and organizations are not directly asking for this, there's the organizational death doula work is in high demand. And I just kind of, out of curiosity on LinkedIn, I think 6 months ago, asked if there was any who knew about literal organizational death doulas. And I think I got a couple of recommendations, but the post went viral. I think reached 70,000 people because of this subtle but fierce and strong craving for being held in these processes of letting go to let come.
Could you explain for the listeners who might not know the death doula role, but just as a death doula, how a death doula serves a person, and then we can open it into like how it might work. But yeah, just to give people a headline of what is the death doula role.
We have doulas. We have doulas for bringing people into life. That has become a more and more common practice, that you as parents to be want someone there by your side that is facilitating your desires and needs in the process of giving birth. So that's something that we see more and more also in hospitals, that people are bringing their doulas into the hospital. So someone who is nourishing, tending to the birthing woman, understands her needs, her desires for how she dreams of her birth. So that's a need that more and more are recognizing that really helps create conditions for a life-affirming birth situations. And death doulas are doing the same kind of work, but not when we are entering the world, but when we are exiting the physical realms, they are brought in to help create the space for the individual, but also the families that are preparing themselves to say goodbye. So what does the dying person need? What are their wishes and desires for how they want to say goodbye? The death doula is facilitating really important little rituals and sharing circles with the dying person and the families around giving thanks, being grateful for all that was, so that we can let go with dignity and celebration and joy. And also just kind of being deeply present with this painful moment that it is to say goodbye to a loved one, and for the loved one to leave this world. And I just thought that there's something here. There's a quality of the presence. There's a quality of the questions being asked in these situations that I think we need much more of. And an organizational death doula was just a word that I made up. I don't think it's a thing, at least not yet. But mark my words, it will be, because we need it deeply. We need those space holders that can facilitate that we are saying goodbye to the world that we know. We're saying goodbye to our old identities. We are saying goodbye to the way we used to do business, to the way that we used to be a municipality. And we are entering a new phase. And that requires this deep quality of presence. Because the reason that I was saying that I started to feel I was doing a disservice is that in times of turmoil, people are looking for the cracks of life. And that's part of the human strength. It's something to be grateful for. But as I said, it becomes hollow if we are just approaching the life's principles to fix things quickly. Things quickly, to patch things up so we could go back to usual or back to normal, just using slightly different words and adjusting a bit here and there. But actually, we won't have life on this planet in 100 times if we are just fixing a bit here and there and patching up a little. We need a radical transformation, and that can be very, very overwhelming. And that requires space holding for ourselves. It requires that we are present with the grief that will activate in ourselves, in our children, in the communities that we are a part of. And so now my work is more focused on the both and. The joy, because we need joy, we need celebration.
Sure.
But joy and celebration can be activated on a deep foundation that that we know the reality, and that we have also tended and made space for our grief and our fears as well.
There are two stories on Spaceship Earth, a passenger story and a crew story. The passenger story is based on extraction, transaction and distraction, and it's leading us towards collapse. The crew story is based on connection, cooperation and participation. It leads towards regeneration.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I'm with you. I'm really experiencing this in the last few years as well, trying to find ways to bring both of these thresholds, I guess, or realities into how do we bring them into the space that we're in. And what I see and what I experience and what I learn is that, paying attention to endings, to grief, to loss, so much can actually come through that process.
Yes.
That we can't even imagine when we're coming into it that anything but darkness and fear and mess and fucked upness there's nothing else here, but actually when we allow ourselves and create the spaces and the support to go in and go down and go through, and all extraordinary things can quite often, and it's not saying that it's not saying that these things disappear, but it is about moving, right? It's about moving these energies through us and recognizing that they are a life force. Like grief is, it's a very powerful life force that, at least again, I can only speak for the culture that I'm in and my experience of it, but the fear of going there is huge, and it's culturally, there's so many reasons why we're in that position. But what we see is there's an enormous creative potential in this work and intending to this parts of ourselves. And to your point about the rushing to the life affirming, I think it's just that whole thing again, isn't it? It's like, everything else that is not human is going through these processes, is recognizing that, it is the breakdown and the decay and the death and the loss and the darkness and the confusion. It's the alchemizing possibility that can only come through that. It's unavoidable for every other living thing. It's an unavoidable part of the cycle. Yet obviously it's still very terrifying within our current sort of modes of operating and the systems that we sort of move around in quite sort of clinical ways, and because it's messy. It's messy. I think that's probably why, talking to you actually, I was starting to realize many reasons why I began to withdraw from the consulting space, because I didn't know how to voice all I felt was this total rejection of wanting to go there, and didn't really know how to be with that. But like you, felt that I couldn't speak to regeneration or these kind of regenerative futures without sitting with this part of it, because it's so fundamental. And I think the other thing is, I think anybody that sort of tends to something that's not human, a vegetable patch, a compost heap, some trees, kind of sort of knows this. It's kind of like, because you're sort of experiencing these cycles over time. You're understanding the sort of the dynamicness of life and death and the entanglement and grief and love, and it's all there, it's all tied up, and we can't keep pushing it apart. But it does bring up, I guess, this whole death doulas and organizations. And I mean, it's funny, isn't it? I go back to what we started about, when the post-COVID and all this opening up that happened. And I think I was wondering about that was, that sort of, I think perhaps for me, what I noticed is the vulnerability that everyone felt. I think was such a big, this suddenly kind of, oh shit, the world that I thought was fixed is not at all. And the fear that we all experienced in ways during that first wave, I think really opened us up, right? To like, oh my God, we are alive and we do feel things and we do care about each other and this thing called nature. And yet, I guess in a top line, it felt like the sort of automization, the kind of the sort of the growth of AI and everything just suddenly just sort of took us away from that.
And wars and geopolitical instability and all of that. That is just, I mean, what I see is just so much fear and so much kind of re-obsession with old ways of doing business. So I was sharing that for quite a few years. There was a growing interest and recognition among the kind of people that I collaborate with that we need more of this. And then about a year ago, things started to shift, and now they sent their employees to AI courses or more kind of traditional resilience courses, because now we need to toughen up and work more and be more efficient, which was also
it's like a hardening up, like a hardening. There's a kind of a softening and an opening, and it feels like
and increased fear, and now we really need to kind of they want to ride this wave by intensifying ways of doing business, by being the words they use is to become more efficient and more kind of. I was very curious about the big fours, for example, talked about resilience, and McKinsey and Deloitte and all of them, they have all kind of done their reports this year and last year about the increased demands for resilience. Resilience seems to be top of mind for many people at the moment, but we see resilience completely differently. So in the kind of the McKinsey Deloitte reports, resilience is portrayed as this kind of, we need to be more efficient, we need more top-down leadership, I think is actually used as one of the headlines in the McKinsey report, because managers need to oversee more, we need to kind of strategize, and we need to find talent that have grit. And grit means that kind of fierceness, the hardness that you were speaking to. Those kind of people that can just kind of
don't die, basically.
Yeah. I just see resilience completely differently. I think we need to learn from living systems in terms of how do we build flexibility, the capacity to transform and evolve. We do that through really strong relationships. We do that in a human context. We do that when we have trust, diversity, when we have these processes of death.
Yeah, I'd say when we're allowed to grieve.
When we're allowed to grieve. In
my own experience. Yeah. That builds resilience, you know. It's
that builds resilience. And I see that again and again on a team level, that teams that have the capacity to ride through tensions and disagreements, where they actually see the tension as the entry point to evolution and growth and up-leveling, instead of shying away from it and suppressing it and being kind of afraid of conflicts. But teams that have really strong psychological safety, have a strong degree of diversity, they are the essence of resilience. Teams that are able to kind of hold tensions, hold conflicts, because they understand that they don't have to bend over backward to fit into something they don't align with on the values-based level. They belong. They have a sense of belonging. They know it's not dependent on them kind of speaking words that are not authentic to them. So their belonging is not something can be purchased or sold. They belong, and they know they can trust each other. Those kinds of teams can ride waves and storms in resilience, with true resilience at the realm.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? What we that contrast in definition of what does it mean to be resilient. And I'm very there as well with, I think this again of seeing, we can't go to the doom stuff, the death stuff, you know, which is a kind of bizarre sort of you know, controlling, weird, not life logic, but I understand why it's there. But it's strange, isn't it? Because recognizing that when we go through these cycles, when we go through these processes of shedding and letting go, as everything else alive is doing, of course it opens the space for something new to come, for a life energy to come through that wasn't there, that was stagnant, suppressed, held back, whatever it is. Okay, in my little mind, I look out into the world and I go, we're so fucking stuck. That's how I see things, like a
Yes.
stuckness. You know, it's like a sort of everything's stuck. It's like a sort of stuck way of being, thinking, perceiving. It's just, and it feels very limiting, although it's kind of communicated to be this kind of really, you know, like, oh, I have all these possibilities, but it's just so limiting. It's just like, oh, it's just stuck, you know? And every time there's a, you know, whatever there is, the genocide's growing, the climate's getting madder, and it's like we can't move. No. It's almost like it's still like, you know, leadership, politics, mainstream media, it's the same kind of like stuck response. And I guess where I've got to in my work is like, you know, and where I'm probably putting most of my time these days into, and I've sort of zoomed much more into place, because for many reasons I've had, you know, my life has shifted somewhat and my ability to move around. So I've been much more driving into place and bioregional work and land-based work, and actually more and more sort of non-ordinary experiences on the land, which I'm guiding with my collective to help people unstuck themselves, I would say, you know, to sort of, to experience, to come off this highway of modernity and its limitations and its inability for you to even feel what you're carrying, you know, or to even know that perhaps you're just full of grief, right? Because you're so stuck in the machine.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and I see that, and I see it's the possibility of working with people like this and working in community and helping people step more into service by helping them, you know, develop their own practice so that they become more aware of, you know, what they're holding, what they're carrying, the need for initiation, ritual, ceremony, whatever it might be, to unstuck themselves, or whether that's in their own life, whether it's in their community, really trying to help these ways, right? These regenerative ways, right? To really embody them and know them. And so I can't help but just keep coming back. It's like, I don't see us unstucking ourselves without, you know, more of these types of experiences happening, because I just think we can't think our way into this, right? It's like and I don't know. I guess, are you, because that question of organisational death doula, and again, that brings up, you know, what needs to die in this time, right? And there's behaviours and there's belief systems and there's ways of perceiving and thinking and being, but there's also really obvious things like really toxic, destructive, extractive industries, or and again, some of these questions for some organizations are huge, because in some ways you might say, if you were being, you know, completely honest about it, like, well, yeah, the whole thing needs to die, right? This whole shebang. Whereas other organizations might say, well, actually, there's a part of us that we need to let go of.
Yes.
But there's also another thing that's emerging. And I know also that that's not going to happen by itself. It's only going to happen through intentional, you know, energy and commitment and people really stepping into this responsibility. And I guess, are you seeing within the work you're doing now, or how this, particularly this kind of, this deeper work of letting go, of giving grief the attention it needs, are you seeing those things starting to happen within these more power structures?
Yes, 100%. And I think that is what gives me the most hope these days, is because I have worked in the field and realm of sustainability. That has been part of me since I was a kid. So it has shifted. It has shifted to now be focused on regeneration. But my previous life was a sustainability professional. And the people that I talked to back then were people that were also interested in that. And maybe they were head of sustainability within a big corporation, but they had that kind of passion and interest. And something that is shifting is the intensity of the moment that we are navigating as a collective means that there's collapse happening on many different levels. So there's a lot of individual collapse. It can be stress and burnout, but it can also just be this kind of, I see again and again people that are just finding themselves as a crossroad. I cannot do this anymore. I don't know why. I have come to the end of a crossroad, but I have, and I need to find a new pathway forward. So many of the processes of, for example, regenerative leadership or business being activated within big organizations or municipalities is almost always because someone was at the end of the crossroad and they decided not to leave the organization, but stay and see what they could activate within. And then they started to speak up. They started to suggest new ways of just simply facilitating a meeting. Something that started to cultivate the soil with people, given these spaces to reconnect with themselves, that inner reconnection. And then what happens slowly when that inner connection is being cultivated and catered for and given space is that people start to kind of see the world around them differently. So what I mean by that is that processes that I've been a part of where I facilitate a process for a team of people that have never left the corporate space or space to do a workshop or an offsite. And suddenly they're finding in a forest, not for the first time, of course, they have taken runs and walks in their kind of private life before, but they have never been in a forest and being held and being present with that kind of ecosystem. And suddenly they're given just an hour of silence sitting by a tree with potent reflective prompts. And then that kind of activates something completely differently in people that are not people that have had a kind of natural dedication to the environment, if we can speak about it that way, or sustainability. But suddenly it's just that kind of, they are given the place and the space to feel themselves and feel the interconnected world that they are all part of. And then things start to shift, kind of, it's really this kind of mobilization of mini movements that I thankfully see in more and more organizations. It feels more quiet than a couple of years ago, but it's equally powerful because it's not top down. It's not kind of something that is intrigued by the promises of regenerative business, but it's people that are at the crossroad. I cannot continue this path. I need to figure out new ways where I can be myself and I can have that inner connection. I can have that connection and presence with my family, with my friends, and I feel connected to life. And then when these people are courageously starting to speak up, could we do things differently within here? What they are always, mark my word, what they are always activating is other people that are like, I feel the same. And in the beginning, it always feels awkward. It feels awkward to facilitate a meeting differently when they are allowing more space to be, less noise and more presence. But it's something that it's always what people are demanding more of. And another very kind of practical example, I'm often booked for just like a workshop, come in to share a bit about regenerative leadership, a few exercises, and then that's it. What always leaves the biggest mark is when we do deep listening. When after I have shared a few things, I facilitate deep listening where they start listening to themselves. After a little mini guided meditation, then they do deep listening deeply to themselves and another human being for 5 minutes each when the person that is listening is just receiving and not interrupting. It's always that exercise that leaves the biggest mark on people, which is interesting, right? In a world like ours, doing something as simple and as listening to another human being for 5 uninterrupted minutes is what is kind of like to people. So all of this to say that there is this collective longing for life-affirming ways of being in all sectors and fields right now. It's about tapping into the courage to actually start to do things differently and just practice a different way of being. And that the life-affirming message is not about kind of la 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 hogging a tree. It's about being real. It's about authenticity. And that comes with also being present with what needs to die.
Yeah, beautiful. You talked about this idea of like the work is a bit quieter. Like it's kind of like and that's interesting to me because I have conversations with peers in like the creative industries still, like, and I know that's exactly what I'm hearing back from them. There's been a real quietening, particularly in the sort of senior folks in kind of more senior levels, because there's been this, and particularly the creative industries, been in the marketing industries, this huge kind of wave of energy around AI, right? Which took a lot of the folks that were working around responding to climate, trying to bring this, what is the response of that sector. And there was a lot of momentum and energy building over those years, but it has really gone the other way. But actually what I've been hearing is this quietening. And I'm really interested, work that I'm doing a lot more of at the moment is intergenerational work. So I'm really interested in, we still have we have very senior people in powerful positions. We have obviously the impacts of a lot of AI, which is obviously starting particularly in kind of service sectors, which is sort of really wiping out a lot of work. But you also have younger generations in these sectors who are feeling things and obviously feeling, and again, it's not binary, they're feeling all of it. They're feeling, at least learning says they're feeling like the rest of us, very contradicted. Parts of them are wanting, to progress and, be successful in those metrics that we've built up around achievement and status and positionality and finance, and then part of them are just like, this future's wrecked, and where do I sit with all that? And I guess I'm quite interested in, are there any moves, sort of intergenerational moves going on within sectors? Because that feels to me like a sort of like this quietening that's going on, particularly at senior levels. But actually, how can we? It feels like there's a need and potential for sort of intergenerational connectivity within sectors and organizations to really, because if you're at either end of those spectrums, you're seeing the future quite, there's common fears, but I think you're seeing them pretty differently in terms of what your pathway looks like, for example. So I'm wondering whether intergenerational work is coming up for you in this work and in this process of really stepping into this life-affirming logic, which again, for me, would really needs to have intergenerational thinking and capacity going on, because otherwise, we're not doing what life is doing, right? Which is centering the young.
Yeah, I see that, and I see I see two patterns emerging around the need for a growing need of elders, and this another kind of collective feeling of feeling like an orphan, because there's a craving for elders, elders that can facilitate this work, that are rooted in life-affirming ways. A lot of the younger generation feels lost. Many of the elders in their workplace have done work in a way that they don't resonate with. So there's a longing for elders that are not there yet, and a feeling of lostness among the younger generation. But more and more, thankfully, senior executives that are aware of the role that they play in bridging to the new way of working. So what I mean by that is senior executives that understand that they have contributed to a way of running a business that is rooted in extraction and power over, and that they have a unique position, power, and influence now, so that if they, as part of an executive team, started to shift their ways and started to communicate to the young people within their organization that now is the time. And we are respectfully listening to you as well in terms of how do we create a thriving workplace. So it's this kind of humble stewardship of being aware of your role as an elder and humbly and courageously walking down the corporate ladder and entering these uncharted fields as a facilitator, and kind of shifting your role as a facilitator, a listener, someone who understands that I don't have the answers, but I believe we collectively can find the answers. I see more and more of that happening as well, which is incredibly powerful, because that is the role of eldership that we need now. Because no, we don't have the answers, and it's not expected from you to have the answers, but what this situation requires of you the capacity to facilitate. How can we find new answers together?
Yeah, that's the invitation. I guess another time in we explore a lot in this podcast, explore a lot in my work is trusting other forms of intelligence in these times, right? Sort of beyond, how do we really begin to sort of trust that there are other ways, there are other intelligences beyond us, beyond the human mind, let's say, and of what we know to be true. I mean, some of the most interesting stuff I'm experiencing is through actually work that I'm involved in around here, which is sort of river-based movements that are starting to really sort of really learning to listen to the river and all of the life that's there. But also what we're seeing is things are happening like rights of nature type work, rights of the river type work. What we're seeing is even where you have local councillors, we've just done these pilgrimages and, walking the river with communities, with activists, with farmers, with artists, and really trying to sort of deepen our understanding of the river and how it relates to the land and how the land relates to the community and how it relates to the health of the, and all of this great stuff. But what's been really interesting is seeing how these practices, these experiences, these like walking together with the river is starting to lead to quite interesting breakthroughs. For example, the rights of the river being recognised, through local councils. So again, and you could say, well, there's a lot that's contributing towards that. Obviously, there's the legal movement that's going on, but there's something about this connection that's happening between land, river, people, politics, power, and something is coming through that is helping these shifts happen, which for me are these are the kind of things I find a lot of hope in, because I think, oh wow, that's like, okay, this is quite radical in all the right ways, right? It's getting to the root of the problem. It's starting to say, this is a living being, this river. It's been here way longer than we have. And we have to recognize that, the health of the river pretty much reflects the health of the community, and at the moment it's not healthy. And so, I mean, that's just one example, I'd say, right? But this idea of how we're beginning to know, we're starting to draw on other intelligence. And I know that's big in your work. And I know, I mean, I'm so far down the rabbit hole now, I get most of my advice from a couple of oak trees up the road. There's like, that's where I go, often to sit with difficult questions, but I'm really interested in, again, are we starting to see these practices drawing on these other ways of knowing, drawing on these other intelligences as part of how we're beginning to make decisions within the organisational world or whatever? Are you starting to see this spreading?
Yes. Yes, I am in many ways. And more also, I mean, you're speaking to movements that are happening in the UK, and similar movements are happening in Norway, and where I'm from, Denmark. There are also more and more people that are from wealthy backgrounds or have come across substantial amounts of money through their career that are starting to invest that up depleted lands that have been in the hands of extractive monoculture and exploring how to regenerate that and how to grow food in different ways. There's really a strong movement in terms of how do we grow what we eat differently. And this in Denmark, we had an election recently, and one of the things that were highest on the agenda was how we treat pigs, because one of our biggest exports is pigs to all over the world, and also how that have resulted in a lot of poison in our drinking water. And that was not something that got any attention 5 years ago, but has helped activate the shift in mindset around when we are buying produce that has been exposed to poison. It's that's not the end game. That poison seeps down into the soil, into our drinking water, and it actually affects us, and we can see that in our blood. We have microplastic in our blood. There's a growing awareness among people also that are super wealthy that this is something that they need to invest in. So that's one dimension, and the other dimension is that I see more and more companies that are really catering to allowing more biophilic environments for themselves and their employees, so nature-inspired environments. And it can either be bring nature indoors, but it can also be if they have that opportunity to build a fireside circle, to have spots by an oak tree, to work more deliberately with the greater interconnected web of life, the more than human world. And maybe they are not using words like you and I are using now, but that is what they're doing. Kind of listening to an oak tree, or sit by a river or a lake or the ocean, and just allowing yourself to hold questions in those spaces. Not spoken to as we need to bring in the voice of the ocean, but the technique, if we can call it that, is what they are actually doing, and allowing something, another intelligence, to also weave its way into their decision making.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast. If you'd like to support the running of the Spaceship Earth podcast, head over to our Substack and sign up. You'll get every episode straight to your inbox, weekly writing, plus other crew offerings. We're grateful for whatever you can give. Join us at becomingcrew.substack.com.
It's beautiful. It's good to hear. You wrote something a few months ago which caught my attention. It was not many things catch my attention on LinkedIn these days, to be honest. I was like, funny old place. You wrote something about how to be in service in times like these, and it struck me in a few ways, because we talk of service a lot in our learning journeys with Becoming Crew. It's very much a kind of, one of our sort of foundations is how to be in service, right? How to step more into service in these times. How to be crew. Right, exactly. How to find what's yours to do and how to step in. And you wrote a post, about how do I best serve? And I think you were talking, it felt to me like you were sort of talking about the sort of sometimes what can feel like the overwhelm. Do I keep going with like trying to support leaders to become more regenerative and to step into this, accepting this death of stuff, or do I just go and grow veg with my family?
Exactly.
Yeah, and for me it's struck a chord because it's something that I'm constantly, and I'm nowadays I think I'm probably doing all of those things. That might be the ADHD, but maybe it's like I'm growing food, I'm in place, I'm trying to do the work, but it struck me as a really pertinent question that I think a lot of folks, again, under the surface, I think are sort of sensing and feeling, maybe not quite maybe not quite articulating that, but definitely feeling this, like, where do I put my energy? You know, because you could say, you know, we're, how you would describe these times we're in. They're the times of endings, whichever way we look at them, right? So it's kind of like, and of course that means also there's lots of, you know, there's beginnings that are happening, but you know, they are profound. We are alive in a profound moment in time, and where we decide to put our energy is you know, and for those of us that have still are able to choose, you know, to be able to say, yeah, actually I can choose a little bit here, which is, of course, is not everyone, but there are a large amount of people, I think, who do have a choice, and perhaps maybe haven't been necessarily paying as much attention to, you know, what is going on. But I just wanted to just to see what came up for you around that. What how do you sit with that? What have you learned from putting that out there? And do you have any sense of anything that you can share with listeners around that? Because it does feel like a question of our time.
Yeah, I really do think it's the question of our time, and it's not something I have an answer to. But that LinkedIn post was just out of kind of, I guess on the day, frustration and anxiety around, am I doing enough? Am I putting my privilege? Because as you are also speaking to, both you and I have massive privilege when you look at people elsewhere in the world. We are not in a war zone. We have a healthcare system. The list is long. So that has also been a driver for me since as long as I can remember. How can I put this privilege to good use so that I'm not just kind of hoarding for myself, but that I'm making a difference for my brothers and siblings that are in parts of the world without the same privilege and freedom that I have. It's also part of Regenerative's business model to how can we constantly pay it forward. And I think it's a healthy tension, but it can also become overwhelming to constantly ask yourself, how can I do more? And the answer that I currently have is that it's coming back to the kind of the joy and the celebration that grief work needs as well. That I am only as powerful as my willingness to feel joy and gratitude and slow down. I cannot be in communication with the greater web of life and if I am rushed, and if I have the stigma of the change maker is to have the weight of the world on your shoulders, and that belief that for me to be worthy, I need to work around the clock. For me to be of value, I need to never rest. And that's something that I guess you have seen in yourself and others that are passionate change makers, that we cannot slow down, that the world depends on us. Rest is not for me. And of course that has changed for me a long time ago with the brain injury that I was mentioning in the beginning, that I need the rest. For me to be resilient, I need to actually cultivate to my soil for me to grow healthily. But I still have that tension around hours that I invest in a project, in my garden, in my community. Is it enough? How can I spend the time that I'm lucky to have? How do I spend it more wisely? Could I do not necessarily more, but could what I do be more potent? Could I be of deeper service? How could I activate more powerful ripples of transformation? That is a question that I will probably, I don't know, but I think I will bring it to my grave. And maybe that's part of my driver as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. It's lovely as well because I resonate with the sort of push and pull and the constant sense. And I've again, I think part of becoming elder, right, is like you realise I'm a lot more able now to manage my energy than I was, and that's been earned through
trial and
lots
error.
Of pain. Lots of pain, a lot of pain. I'm a lot more able to recognise. I'm more aware of where I'm heading and what's pulling me than I used to be. So I'm able to see myself going down somewhere and go, why are you going down there? You know what I mean? Or actually, let go of that.
Exactly.
That's not for you. It's not yours.
But it's super tricky because both you and I have deep internalized colonial patterns. We all do. And regardless of how long you sit with this and shed layers and all of this, I still stop in my tracks and feel that I'm not
doing enough.
Yeah, I'm not doing enough, and I'm not deserving of this rest. I mean,
what is that all about?
I'm 3 weeks away from going into a month-long vacation, and there's still a part of me that feels guilty about that.
Yeah, like you say, it's very, very deep programming, right? And
it's very deep.
I think what I've been playing with more in the last couple of years is really trying to create more space for myself, realizing that I need, like, for me to be able to serve in the ways that I can serve. I need space.
Yes.
I need like my own kind of.
The way that helps
time.
my programming in that sense is to plug it in my calendar as if it was a lecture I was giving or whatever work.
Yeah.
It's just go for an hour walk in the forest or sit in the garden or do garden work and just kind of weave it in. I still have fairly small kids. The youngest is 6. So there's also, there's a lot of my time that is becoming... Yeah,
you're tending, you're mumming, you're mothering.
Exactly. But that means that sometimes you extract from yourself even more because then your hour where you can do work like write or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Types of things that is my work is shorter than maybe people that do not have small kids. So I need to be more efficient and focused in the hours that I have available. But I just know that if I spent kind of 5 hours fiercely focused on the computer, I drain myself. So I have to incorporate meeting slots with my meeting with myself and nature. Otherwise, it won't work. So that's just a tip for the listener because it has helped with my rewiring that this is actually work as well, and I need it.
I had some time on a course I was guiding a few years back, and we had the writer Jay Griffiths come on, and she was talking about, someone asked this question, the world's so fucked, there's so many issues, like what do you focus on, because it's just like all these things. And she said, I think more and more of seeing your thing as like whatever it is that you are here to offer out into the world as a kind of like a little mosaic tile, and that's yours, and go deep, deep, deep into that, whatever that is, and just trust that the other mosaic tiles will be picked up by others, and that you can't be responsible. You can't hold all of this stuff.
No, that's how I see it as well. I need to do my little thing as deep and well as I can, and
that takes time for us to understand, to know that actually I can do this thing, and hopefully that that's my offer to the spaceship at this time.
Exactly.
Just trust. So listen, a couple of questions to bring us in to the end. Is there a project or a person or a thing or a being that's really giving you inspiration at the moment to sort of keep going with what you're doing?
It's going to be very banal and cliche, but when I need inspiration and kind of groundedness, it's always my forest that I go to. And it's just such a, again, I'm going to sound like the biggest cliche, but that whole theme that we have explored for the past hour and a half of death and rebirth, the greatest teacher is the forest, especially in our part of the world where we have very visceral seasons, it can be so life affirming to go for a walk in a forest in the winter because it can feel like you're walking in a death landscape, but you just know all of the potent things that are happening deep within the branches, deep within the soil. So that will, I think, forever be my greatest master.
It's true. I'm the same with forests. Constantly in and out of them, always. And for me, they're a great. If I do feel like the overwhelm has been building, generally it's like go to the woods,
exactly,
and see what's going on there, and be reassured that actually there's a whole load of life that's doing its thing.
Exactly.
So this might be connected, but I'd ask: do you have a small or a strange or a sacred practice that you carry to stay in relationship with something bigger? and you can't be going to the forest because you've done that?
I have many small little rituals. Some of them are, of course, sacred just to me and will stay that way. But for me, it just helps being connected to the cycles of the moon. It helps for me to connect deeply with what many people see as weeds and explore how I can transform them into medicine. How can I take the mugwort that many garden owners hate and transform them into medicine? The same with dandelion, and I love having a garden now where when I just leave it be, all of these wonderful weeds that my neighbors look at like, are they lazy or not taking care of their garden as you should? But to me, it's just lush and potent and medicine. So that connection to plants and being kind of being curious about why are they here? Why do we have Mother Elder in the garden? What is she here? What is her curiosity? What is her essence? Not as if, what are you here for to provide and offer me, but how can we share this land in relationship? It may sound really crazy, but we live on a tiny little plot of land. But since we took over this tiny plot of land, it's just in a kind of residential area, and set the garden free, so many new plants and mini trees have emerged. I've planted many of them as well because I'm a geek in terms of, okay, so these insects need these types of trees, and they are actually on the verge of extinction because people do not find the trees pretty and all that. So there's many things that I've planted, but also just let things grow, and just being in a wonderfully kind of courage and relationship filled with curiosity, not courage, but curiosity, that sense of wonder and awe. And who are you? Who are you? Your little weird plant. Who are you?
I love that. It doesn't sound weird. I mean, I'm all over the garden. I've actually been cultivating mugwort plants, actually from cuttings from a mugwort plant up on the hill that I've got to know the last couple of years, and I've actually been getting really into like figuring out how, it's just cuttings and creating new plants, and with all kinds of herbs and local plants, and I it's like, again, this is the stuff that keeps me like, this helps with my resilience. And like, just being in relationship with these plants. And I don't I'm learning about them. I don't know intellectually like what they all are. I'm learning, but you can be in relationship. They're responding, and I'm tending, and I'm learning, and and they're responding, and it's extraordinary when you think about it. That when you think actually how much is possible when we are, if we all had access to a small garden and the time to actually just then tend to it. It's like it's all there. The answers are all there. It's like
true.
Anyway, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, just the signs that you can see in a mini garden a couple of weeks ago. All of the birds in my garden were like making a lot of noise, and so I went there and looked, and just kind of 2 feet away was a dead pigeon. And it was part of a pigeon couple that I was so enjoying, because they were coming to a specific tree every night and every morning. And suddenly the partner was just kind of looking down towards at the dead partner. And that's part of life as well. And it's kind of, I mean, 24 was a year of exploring and being present with death doula work. And if I could take another year off, I would just kind of be completely immersed in my tiny little garden, and just explore deeply all of the relationships and the signs and patterns and the abundance when you start to pay attention to all of the life that is happening in just that tiny little piece of land.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and you think it would be so possible to offer everyone a small piece of land. Do you know what I mean? And what that might, what those kind of moves might bring. So yeah, I'm interested in this question of attention, like where we're paying what we pay attention to. What what would you recommend paying attention to right now? Closer attention to? Is there something that you think could be helpful for folks to actually pay more attention to?
Pay more attention to your intuition, and for people that are like, what does that actually mean? That inner knowing, that inner curiosity, that inner concern, that inner kind of I wonder, that inner kind of sense in your gut or the hairs in your neck that are kind of sending you signals. Pay attention to your body. Pay attention to the signals.
Beautiful. That sounds like a very wise invitation. So, right, you have to play with me on my Spaceship Earth Becoming Crew story here. So this invitation of becoming crew, what might that ask of you in your local ecosystem?
Oh, we moved here a year and a half ago. And although I have been deeply immersed in my little garden, something that I'm sensing I would like to explore more of, and that I often hold myself back from because I am a hardcore introvert, an empath, super sensitive. So being around people is not my favorite activity. But what I would like to do more of is build intentional community where I live, in a regular residential area with regular kind of people. But in my little street, where there's a lot of families with small kids and children, how could I be a better steward, a better gardener in my little local neighborhood? How could we be more resilient force for good? Not in a way where I kind of become the preacher and now you need to kind of steward your garden in the same way that I do. I mean it in a relational way. How can I be a better neighbor? How can I facilitate a stronger community where people feel they can belong?
That's beautiful. I think that's something that more of us might be feeling as well, actually. I have a sense that that's something.
But that's something that would require me massively stepping out of my comfort zone.
Right, exactly, yeah. These more thresholds.
Yeah.
So I guess just to really bring us to a close, and I wonder whether I mean, this can be anything, but I wonder, because we've spoken a lot about this, facing into this, the grief, the ending, the loss, all the painful stuff that we know is there. And I know we spoke probably more through the lens of folks working in their organizations and whatever. But I think it's something that we know we're all carrying, and it's kind of unavoidable, really. It's in some ways it feels like an unavoidable move that we're all being confronted with at some point in this short time we have here. But I wonder whether there was an invitation or a practice or a something that that listeners, that you could offer just to play with, or that might sort of be a way of stepping towards that. I don't know. Or something you've noticed or learned from these times you've spent with the doulas, for example.
That what comes to mind are a buffet of many different things, but the word and the energy that stands out the most is that of presence. Dare to be present with what feels uncomfortable. Dare to be present with yourself. Dare to be present with your partner, your neighbors, your children. Because we are really deprived of presence. Are we truly there for ourselves and each other? Or are we just kind of rushing through our days, always thinking about tomorrow? So just a daily kind of practice of presence. And it can just be kind of as you end your day. If it feels too big to begin facilitating deep listening with your partner every day, it can just be a daily practice of listening to yourself. What has felt alive in me? Is there any grief? Is there any joy? Is there anything that needs to be felt, seen, and heard?
Beautiful. I think I'm going to ring the bell.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, honestly, really beautiful. Thank you for the time. I really enjoyed
so much.
this conversation.
Thank you for the wonderful and beautiful work that you do in this world, in your garden and elsewhere.
You too.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Laura. There's a lot in that. There's a lot that conversation brought up for me that has opened up a load more questions that I'd like to explore. Yeah, if it has brought stuff up for you, please do share. You can, send us an email, hello@thespaceship.earth. You can share a comment on the Substack post that this will live on. Yeah, we'd really love to hear what this stuff brings up. I'll link to Laura's work in the show notes. If you did enjoy this conversation or you received something, please share it with someone else who might. Post it on your socials, put it in a WhatsApp, send it to someone. This is all... That's my dog, Jem, having a dream. If you received something from this conversation and you think someone else you know might, please do share it. Stick it in an email, put it in a WhatsApp group, post it on your LinkedIn, in your socials. All of this stuff is so essential for these conversations and ideas to spread. And with small, independent, advertising-free podcasts like ourselves, this is how people find us. It's really interesting watching over the years how, as podcasts have become so saturated, perhaps, it feels like there's less and less sharing that goes on, which I sort of understand. But at the same time, if we want these podcasts that we enjoy to continue, there is this reciprocity of sharing, which is completely necessary. And I think that's how life operates on board the spaceship, right? It's the reciprocity. We receive and we give. I'm making a point of this because it really is so important to try and grow new listeners and reach new people with these conversations, with these ideas, with these projects, in the hope that they seed and root and connect and can support some form of shift and transformation and play a little role in that. So yeah, that's my little ask. Please do think about this. If you've received something, please think, actually, I'm going to share this with this person. Every share really, really helps. If you want to stay up to speed with the podcast, our learning experiences, events we're hosting with Becoming Crew, my writing, the best thing to do is to sign up to the Substack, becomingcrew.substack.com. And if you really, really, really like what we're doing, perhaps consider a monthly donation. It's like a price of a pint of beer. Thank you to all of our existing subscribers and those that support us with a donation every month. Is so appreciated, and we couldn't do this work without our subscribers, and we actually we really do need a lot more in order to cover the basic costs of doing this. So have a little think. Okay, thank you for listening, thank you for tuning in. It means a lot that you've decided to spend this time with me, with us. So until next time, look after yourselves out there. Peace and out.
This podcast is created in service to life, for you. It takes time, funds and energy to make. If you'd like to contribute to the running costs, you can donate the price of a cuppa or a pint. Find the link on our website. This podcast wouldn't exist without the following crew: Charlie Shred, Audio Jedi; Seaman Home Burgess, Engine Room; Willow Burgess, Jingles.